Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone. We have a very special guest today, Tom Davidson. He's the founder and CEO of EVERFI. Welcome, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. Hopefully, eventually we'll be able to be doing these in person and not on these screens all the time.
Yeah, I think 2025, that's looking good at this point. So.
Right. By then it'll be maybe like the gamma or something. I don't know. Or maybe we'll get to the Z. Like it's going to be like hurricanes, but there'll be different variants. So, Tom, I would love for you to kind of, I guess give the audience a little bit of background on yourself, and then if you could also answer, how you became interested in the education field.
Sure. So this all really began, I would say, I had a very strange first job after college. I think all of my college friends and roommates knew that I had very little chance of getting a real job. So I ran for the state legislature when I was in college and ended up getting elected and just had a wonderful run in the Maine House of Representatives, serving for 3 terms up there. And while we focused on a million different things, education technology and access to education, wiring schools and libraries together, thinking about the next levels and layers of content that students didn't have access for. Got to remember at the time, this was the mid-90s, education technology really at any kind of scale was in its infancy, and we were lucky enough to work on some really groundbreaking things at that time. The nation's very first one-to-one statewide laptop initiative. We were one of the first states to wire schools and libraries to the internet. So that was a really exciting time, and it kind of ignited. It was the pilot light for really what became this work that I started about 13 years ago when we founded EVERFI. I started with a couple of very good friends that I went to college with in Maine. And the real focus on this was around these areas that are often left outside of the core curriculum in schools. So if you think about things, I always say to people, we don't build chemistry classes, we don't build civics classes. We focus on things like financial wellness and financial literacy, mental health, bullying, opioid abuse, and prescription drug safety. We built one of the largest courses in the world around sexual assault prevention on college campuses. So think about these areas that are often left out of the school day that we think need to be there, that put a lot of pressure on kids. And we build out really sophisticated, pretty awesome courses that are done on mobile devices, done 100% done online, that really go after these big, seemingly intractable social problems.
Yeah, I think about it this way, and where there's the curriculum, right? And then there's kind of like all the, I don't like to say looking at it extra credit, but there's so much other different types of information out there that, young adolescents need access to, or just awareness of. Financial literacy is something I wish I knew how to use a credit card by now, learning how to use a credit card, like in real time myself, right?
Totally. We all learn it by mistake. We tear down our credit, we try to build it back up, we miss payments, we default on things, we get on upside down on loans, and interest rates because we didn't know how to compare them at the time. So it's one of the things that's kind of cool about technology. You can actually create these simulations. You can create these circumstances, put students in the middle of that, let them mess that up 73 times, in a fake environment their junior year in high school before they get a hold of the electric bill, the phone bill, the, credit card and dinging your credit and things like that.
Yeah, and everything is technology these days, where I remember, as a business owner, being able to just use cash. That was before my time, but being able to just use cash, and then now it's dangerous with the credit cards. I love that your platform offers that, and then things around entrepreneurship, being able to learn those types of skills and having that. So that's awesome. And particularly, What kind of shift have you seen? I mean, I know education technology has just blown up in the pandemic. So what kind of shift have you seen there with your platform?
So it's been everywhere and accelerated to a level I don't think any of us would have ever comprehended without an event like this. This has been this event has been as much as it's been an accelerant for education technology, it's been a tragedy for millions of kids in the United States, and really, I think, shines a very, very bright light on the fact that we have to get broadband. We have to get the tools, computers, iPads, broadband in kids' homes. It is a national imperative as it relates to education. Flip side of it is you are seeing that there are things that are far more possible using technology to reinforce math skills, to close the gap on summer learning loss, on bringing things like EVERFI's programs to students by the millions at a scale that we've never seen before. What's so clear about so many of these topic areas, whether it be mental health, whether it be bullying, whether it be financial literacy or anything like it is, teachers have been left to have to go harvest the parts of the internet for these resources. So you've got a teacher that's already underpaid, under-resourced, wildly overutilized to be the chief healthcare giver, mental health provider, teacher, parent often, and ask them to go also be a financial literacy specialist or a mental health advisor or specialist. Teachers are left to go harvest the parts of the internet for all of these resources. It's very, very tough, and it creates a real imbalance of you never know where this information is coming from. You never know if it's reliable. You never know if it's truly prevention-oriented, research-based. And so the opportunity right now that you see coming out of the pandemic is that there has been an incredible conditioning all across the globe for students and teachers to have to be able to interact with this computer, these devices, log on to things like Zoom or Google Meet or things like that. Ultimately, that will be one of the bright spots coming out of this pandemic. Is hopefully it will highlight two things. One is the vast inequities that exist in terms of funding and access for broadband and things like this. It's definitely a big part of what the president is trying to get after as a part of this initiative right now in the infrastructure bill. And then the second piece is that we can scale these initiatives in a pretty significant way and do it meaningfully and substantively. And I really believe in that. I think that could be a real optimistic view of what comes out of this, even though it's been such a, frankly, hellish moment for so many kids and families during this time in the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, I think that's a really, really valid answer in regards to what is happening and where people are signing up, like particularly even CEOs, right? Taking out of education is that, a CEO, you can prepare for a low retention or something within the company happening, but CEOs and even chief operating officers, even somewhat of HR, they're not prepared. No one was trained for what your point is of being able to tend to someone's mental health or mental wellness condition. I mean, that is a whole other skill set, which to your point, you just kind of have to go down Google. And so I think, having EVERFI as a platform to curate, and what we're also trying to do with We Are Everyone through podcasts, but having the online courses is curate some of these sources and educational aspects to help kind of obviously educate children, but also educate teachers. So I think that's really interesting.
Right. Correct. Spot on.
So something that we have been talking about at Pivotal Moments is mental fitness and being aware of the importance of mental strength. What do you think of when you hear the term mental fitness?
Well, so what's interesting about it is I think it's a really powerful term. It's a powerful way to think about it because, listen, there has been this long and very, very sturdy and enduring stigma that's been attached to people expressing themselves, talking openly about their personal mental health. And that in and of itself has put people in the workplace, has put kids in school in a very, very difficult predicament. And I think one of the areas of thinking about this as a very holistic approach to your body. And by the way, at EVERFI, we take an even deeper approach to that, which is we see the real interconnectivity of the things that we focus on. Navigation of the healthcare system, your financial health, and the pressure that builds at home around the types of just unique pressures that money puts on people, that presses down on their shoulders. There's an interconnectivity to this, and the fact that we begin to think about that interconnectivity, to address that interconnectivity, and also to give voice to this, similar to the way we have given voice in the past to people taking care of their bodies physically and not distinguishing between their physical wellness and their mental health. And I think that truly is overall mental fitness, and why we feel so strongly that in the workplace, financial wellness needs to be embedded into the offerings of talent departments, that mental health and that a family focus on your kids and your kids' mental health for employers, that these are things that are interconnected. We just launched a program on healthcare literacy. One of the biggest issues in this country is we don't spend any time talking about the navigation of what a total nightmare it is for families to just understand and navigate the healthcare system. You can actually go at that with by building a learning layer that teaches families, that teaches people about that. And you understand what pressure medical debt, how much it drives bankruptcies and things like that. These are interconnected crises that have come together over a very long period of time. The good news is tools are now available. Tools are now being built at a significant scale that can reach into places that they never have before.
And yeah, I think that's where, you can combine and you kind of think about the taboos, right? If you think about the taboos, like finance is one taboo. I think health, being able to say, hey, Tom, I'm actually really anxious today. Like, do you mind if I can take the second half of the day just for mental health? I mean, those days, that's like where you had to cover everything emotionally. You had to show up like a robot, essentially, where now, being able to talk about health, being able to talk about, some of the finances, be able to talk about, these kind of struggles or just challenges that we all have to navigate, and
well, you do, and also, you realize too as you lead these organizations, and this has been a huge challenge for me. I grew up in, West Texas and Oklahoma, and my dad was in the oil and gas industry, and I came from this military family, and it was kind of like our whole thing was just shove it all down, into the, don't talk about it, you don't air out your issues, you don't give voice to that. And I think it's been one of the healthier things for me is to recognize that that ain't the way to run a company. If you want people showing up every day, feeling like they can be themselves and their whole selves, and I think that's been a really positive thing that's entered the room for a lot of CEOs and leaders of companies to begin to understand that they need to give voice to that and let people give voice to that, and not feel like they will, that there will be any ramifications or stigma attached to that. We got a long way to go. We got a long way to go in this building. We got a long way to go just in the workplace in general, but it's positive to see what's happening. So,
speaking of kind of going back to what I always like to look at, how this pandemic really pulled back the curtain. Probably say this at least in one time in every single podcast interview I do, but the pandemic has peeled back the curtain to really America, or in general to the global society of the economy and the state is, whether that's healthcare, education, all that jazz. And so I'm curious, when it comes to, addressing issues in education within the work that you do, whether that's in inequities or creating a path of sustained education, how does mental fitness impact this work?
listen, I think one of the things that you realize when you are working with kids, and the vast majority of our students, let's just take the K-12 piece for a minute, the vast majority of the students that we work with, and these are hundreds of thousands of incredibly talented kids every single year. One of the things you realize is, I talked a little bit about the interconnectivity of these crises in the country, but you realize the interconnectivity of these pressures on students, and they come at home. They are food security issues. They are massive amounts of healthcare insecurity, and loneliness, and people walk around. You know what people love to do is they just love to knock teachers, and there's just this incredible laziness that exists in this country where we just want to knock teachers and put all of the pressure on teachers to solve this. So, you become chief caregiver, chief mental health advisor, chief educator, chief, parent for the vast majority of the day, chief food deliverer. And so until this country realizes that those pressures, that sense of loneliness, that pressing down on kids who are growing up in just absolutely in the strike zone of high poverty, until you do things like offer very, very deep and significant mental health training and education and learning and support in schools, your expectations should be pretty low that you're going to be able to create an environment where kids feel like they can just soak up learning like a sponge. We don't turn things just on and off like a circuit breaker when we walk in and out of our lives. Like, school doors are not some magical, car wash where you're able to walk in and leave all of that loneliness and pressure and insecurity, food insecurity and safety behind you, and be in a position where you can learn. So I think that the provision and the embedding mental health and self-care and recognition and those pieces into the school day is one of the most important things we can do in the country.
I agree. And, I actually was watching this show on Showtime called Flatbush Misdemeanors. And I'm not saying, it's not, I don't want it's a frank comparison, but I think, the show showcases teachers who are in a rougher part of a neighborhood who are teaching in an urban area. And it's not just their responsibility, like it is their responsibility to teach, but they have a lot of different factors of the children's life that come at them, and then they end up maybe crossing a line and getting in trouble. But in turn, it's really hard to create that boundary as a teacher because you are so involved with the parents, the children, but it's like, where is that boundary to be crossed? Because there are like the rules. So it's particularly now, it's a really interesting time to kind of rejigger, I guess, kind of the schooling system and all of those rules and regulations, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this time coming out of this, we'll see if as a country this is one of the issues with education is it is the most hyper-local approach to any institution we have. These are decisions that are made hyper-locally, run by school districts. The state has some sway. The federal government is interesting, but it's nothing near what that local school district who decides, like the types of foundational, funding, support, and requirements and mandates that you have locally, where a statewide or a countywide or citywide mental health mandate for bringing this type of learning that we're talking about to schools could be really powerful.
Yep. And I'm curious to see too, really as. Frankly, you building and being in the education technology world of how we can continue to have this hybrid learning style to make education more accessible. And particularly, we talk about urban, but rural areas, they don't have broadband, right? So, I mean, there's an issue just kind of all around this country that needs to be addressed. Urban, rural, suburbs, what have you, because of that type of access. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, I remember when I was a state legislator and we would focus on things like, really early interventions around just basic health, checking kids' ears, providing basic healthcare stuff. And people would often, people I loved on the other side of the aisle who would, fight all this stuff would come and be like, well, it sounds elective, that sounds real elective. I'm like, brother, in what world is that elective to you? It may be elective for the kid who's not your child, but similarly, you're hearing that same thing where I think there's a really fundamental thing. You can be like, listen, should schools have just an absolute on-ramp to, the technology that we are all blessed to have, when we live in, these communities that are not high-need communities with low tax base and everything, like, is broadband, is the enablement of infrastructure like this, is this a nice to have? I think anybody coming out of certainly this pandemic they just can't answer anything other than you have to enable these schools, and particularly in rural communities, Native American reservations, others, to get to fully get on the on-ramp to be able to deploy this type of distance learning, because it is going to, listen, you'll never replace a great teacher, never. What you will do is be able to enable a great teacher to have the tools that don't require them, for what we said before, to constantly be going home and spending 7 hours a night putting together technology lesson plans that they have to curate from top to bottom, front to back. Plenty of teachers love to do that. They should do it all day long. They're far better than I am to do it with the kids that they're, but to the places where it can be enabled, like a financial literacy or something where you can build it once and deploy it at a massive scale, we should be doing that all day long.
I mean, yes, that would be amazing, right? Like if we could just get that, it needs to be deployed at a massive scale. I just wish, that's the whole thing of, if you look at these just different types of systems, the healthcare system, where I think the pandemic was able to showcase what was broken, and so now it's like, now it's time to fix it.
Right.
But what do we tackle first, right? Because we know what the answer is, but it's not that easy all the time, right? Unless, I wish I had a magic wand, but,
correct.
It just doesn't work that way.
Totally.
So,
correct.
question. We spoke about mental fitness in regards to, addressing within education. So, how do you apply, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how do you apply the practice of mental fitness within your team and company culture?
Well, we've really made some, Lorraine Holliday, who is our Chief Talent Officer and Chief Human Resource Officer, is an extraordinary, leader who has made this just a massive priority for us. We've done everything from deploy outside resources and specialists and give a certain access to amount of hours for every employee to go seek out mental health reinforcement, treatment, counseling. We have been, particularly during the pandemic, we've always been a place that has valued the delivery of the work and valued the work itself, but don't really get hung up too much on where it happens, how it happens. We don't want to be prescriptive to people in ways that forces them, we think, to put themselves in a box where they feel pressured. We feel like we give lots of latitude in terms of people navigating their own time off, their own PTO, to be able to raise their hands, work at home, and have the flexibility that they need for them and their families. And I think that we have created, we've made huge strides as a company to give voice at our town halls, at our meetings, as the leadership for our teams and our groups, to say to people, you should feel very comfortable raising your hand and telling people that you need that pause, telling people that you need that time, that space, that distance from the work, and feel like that will be embraced and cheered, and not have a stigma attached to that, to those decisions, and giving voice from that. So those are the things that we tried to build into the team over time, so that people can practice that self-care, so that and recognizing, in particular right now, this is a pretty important time to be doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, in regards to just like I'm seeing, even just as I feel with, your whole, since you're not in person, you can kind of take a break sometimes or whatever, but like your calendar could be stacked. Like I know people who have to just like make a break from 12 to 1 because of the fact that, they are just, people just put things on their calendars, and it's like all you do is just look at a screen. So I think it's so important to kind of be kind of aware of that and flexible with that as kind of an organization. And particularly, I think that's also going to make us work better, right, in the long run as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So, based on your experiences thus far, we kind of touched on this, like, how do you see education evolving, and, what role do you think, and I know we spoke about mental fitness a lot, but that is, what we talk about. What role do you see mental fitness and wellness playing, how will it play in this path forward?
Well, I think that school districts, one of the things that I think is exciting is that if you went back to 3 or 4 years ago, this was not a conversation that was happening in the vast majority of school districts by a mile. We put a lot on schools. We ask a ton of schools, and we often treat as someone who used to vote on laws and try to make laws that dealt with this stuff. We ask a lot of schools, and it's not like we ask them and give them a lot more money to take care of it. What's entered the conversation in the last number of years, and it really started before the pandemic hit, but has certainly been elevated by the pandemic, is that some kind of resources at scale, not just for the families and the students who raise their hands and specifically ask for help in the moment, but the types of training, the types of broad learning that can be deployed using technology in a school district that teach students how to advocate for themselves, to teach them how to practice self-care, to teach them how to manage digital addiction, loneliness, like these areas that are putting a ton of pressure. I mean, this is an entirely new world right now with the just broad deployment of devices and our always-on moments that this generation of kids who are, one of the first generations of human beings on the planet who've had the information of the entire world in their pockets at any given time, that is putting an enormous amount of pressure on kids. Socially, as part of school, it's very difficult for them to cut off, practice self-care, not be in this FOMO cycle that is driving so much loneliness and pressure right now. And so there are ways to use prevention, to use efficacy-based strategies that can be deployed. It's not perfect, and no education technology right now is perfect. And we've got to find that balance. No one wants their kids to be the guinea pigs for version 1.0 of these types of things. But we have incredible tools that are beginning to be deployed at scale that allow teachers, counselors, and others to reach and scale their efforts at a pace and at a level that they haven't been able to by the hand-to-hand combat of just one counselor to every 435 students that exist in that school.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. I mean, between just the seeing what was happening with a lot of all the cyberbullying and all this stuff, and I'll tell you something. I think that these kids are a lot more resilient than other generations because of what they kind of are they're the technology, but like technology also not, they want the privacy, right? Because they grew up in a technology world. So I just think it's going to be, it's kind of where, I remember I was just getting started on AIM when I was, in middle school, where now it's, it's interesting to kind of see how they'll be fighting technology and embracing it, and I think they're going to be really huge contributors to the new frontiers of what the technology advancements look like.
It's a great point. Yep.
So I'm excited for those Gen Zers. I mean, I think they've entered the workforce already for sure, but
I've lost track. I don't even know what I am. Just old. I'm just old.
You can join the millennial crowd. I know that we
might as well. Right.
Awesome. So Tom, going to you before we kind of wrap up is how do you flex your mental fitness muscle?
Yeah. So there's a couple of interesting things that have come out of certainly the last couple of years for me. I'm much better these days. There's a couple of things. Like I really try to connect my body and taking care of my physical body with. It's very important to me that I take care of my physical body. So I've gone through definitely a journey in the last say 4 years to. I was doing the CEO of an early stage, startup thing. I was working 20 hours a day. I was, not sleeping. So I've really, number one, prioritized getting a good night's sleep. It's not always successful. Number two is I've really taken care of my physical fitness during this. And number three is that I've done a much better job of distinguishing like my work day from my family and my personal time, which was a pretty important break for me. I was never all that good at that. Probably over the first 10 years of this company, it just all kind of blended and smashed together. I've tried to. There are multiple things that I've done, but I think the biggest thing that I did that was just alarming to me how effective it was is. I went down 90% on like my device use, and it was just unbelievable how great of a. It's still, by the way, it's still like out of control. I still got room to go, but I just found it was just junk in almost all the time, or unnecessary at best all the time. Of just constantly feeding the Twitter, rage, or the Facebook FOMO stuff, or the Instagram performative life, or things like that. Like, I don't have any issue with anybody who does or doesn't engage with that in a major way. I still am challenged by, managing that and tamping that down. But once I took that down in a pretty significant way, I was much, much happier, much more at peace. And then I actually went and kind of did it with alcohol. I kind of just arbitrarily took it down 90%. And Red Meat kind of took it down 90%. I was just like, I'm just going to take everything and just dial everything way down. But it was the device piece that I think is, I just think this stuff is garbage. I think you can find really great things, and there's certainly a benefit to me. I think there's just information is an incredible competitive advantage. I still get that in the places that I need it, but there wasn't this just doom scrolling, grab it first thing in the morning, have it by your bed at night, constantly be attached to it. Most of that time is just junk time. It's just trash. And I think once I, that gave me such a clear head to engage with my kids. I wasn't distracted. I was finding myself just at the dinner table, just checking messages and doing stuff. And it's just, wasn't a whole lot of benefit to it. So that was a really big, I always tell people, I'm like, if you want one thing that would I think it's going to make you happier and feel better, is just, wring that out of your life as much as you can.
Yeah, I would say I think the device thing is really important, particularly because I'm guilty of it sometimes, where it's just I feel like it's like I'm on my computer all the time from 7 to 7 sometimes, and it's like then to drain, you just kind of want to put on a show or something. It's like your eyes are just you just want to look at a blank, not even anything,
Yeah.
But then it's like everyone, since you were working all day, people then you have to then catch up with people. And it's like, do you? I think I've learned boundaries. And I think the device is the biggest thing that you can create boundaries with, because then you are just you come up from your phone, you're like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you'll find out you don't miss it all that much. You really don't. It's, I had people, they were like, well, how did you how did you get off of whatever? And I'll be like, I honestly just deleted it off of my phone. That's how I got up. I realized I just didn't miss it all that much. So we got a long way to go on that stuff for sure.
We definitely do. Well, maybe the Gen Zers will help. Well, I just want to say, this has been awesome. We'd love to have you back on some sort of roundtable. I know, you work with our overall organization a bit too, and you know Bob, so we would love to.
Yeah, great people.
Yeah, great. Potentially have you back on as a roundtable guest. This has been a great conversation, Tom. Is there anything else that you would love to leave with the audience before we wrapped up?
No, this has been wonderful. I just appreciate you, bringing this to the front, and it's such an important conversation, and it's just a blessing to be able to be on with you and learn and give a little view from my side of the house too. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I am your host, Jenn Sherman. We have Tom Davidson on. He is the founder and CEO of EVERFI. And we will catch you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.